Hi, you're listening to the Tech Alliance podcast, or the TEP for short. My name is Marina.
And I'm Andre.
Today, we're focusing on the unique dynamics of open source collaboration.
And for today's episode, we couldn't have had a better guest with more experience in this specific area. We're so fortunate to have Kelly Delaney, a seasoned director of partner development with nobody else but the Drupal Association.
Hi, everybody. Nice to talk to you and see you. I'm seeing you over here on my side. I'm Kelly Delaney. I started my career in product marketing, like I feel like a lot of partner folks do. I did it in the United States for a cable company called Comcast. So internet, it was very funny before internet was very popular a long time ago. And then since then, I've worked in a lot of marketing for agencies. And then I even own a bakery with my husband for a while, kind of an entrepreneur background as well. And through all of these, I was just most interested in finding kind of mutually beneficial and efficient ways to promote ourselves in all our businesses. So for the bakery, I was always looking for like another type of food product like berries or something to, because we were a pie company, to partner up with and sell, to just find a larger ecosystem of partners in our city to like promote our bakery a little more. So it kind of started there. And then before joining the Drupal Association, I took a break to have a kid, and I just wanted to tell that to other folks because it's definitely common. And when I started looking again, I found two folks I used to work with at the Drupal Association. We used to work together somewhere else, and I pinged them, and the rest is history. And I really appreciate being able to reconnect with them.
Talk about growing the pie. That's definitely an inspiring story. And I'm so happy that you mentioned your experience as a parent and taking a break from work and focusing on that. I think some of us on this podcast have similar stories to share. And definitely, yes, it resonates both with us and a lot of our listeners. Well, yes, probably, if I'm not mistaken, the first representative of an open source project on our podcast. And I personally have been working with open source projects for a long time as a partner manager. So I'm super bought into the ecosystem. I'm super inspired by the open source approach to development. Tell us a little bit from where you're sitting. What does Drupal's partnership model look like as an open source project, as an open source platform, and an association that drives that?
Yes, good question. It is a little different than a lot of partnerships that I've run into. And Andre, we've worked together in the past. So the Drupal Association is a 501c3 nonprofit, which is a nonprofit in the United States, but we're a global association. And it was created a few years after our Drupal founder, Dries, created Drupal around 2001. And our initial purpose was to generate funding to produce the largest conference called DrupalCon, which is still in 20 years later, we're still doing DrupalCon. But as Drupal grew, more people wanted to start contributing and relying their businesses on Drupal, and they needed a framework and some more funding to support this large community. So the Drupal Association was created, and our mission is to accelerate Drupal through innovation, foster growth, and create a safe and secure open web for everyone. That said, our partnership program is made up of organizations who contribute to Drupal, such as agencies, ISVs, and even our end users who are using Drupal. A lot of our end users who are on Drupal have whole Drupal departments who contribute back to the project. But these organizations are partners, and the ones that contribute and are our partners, we call it certified partners. And there's different levels based on how much code contribution they have and how large the organization is. So that's kind of how our ecosystem of partnerships is made up. It's those who contribute and those who want to sponsor Drupal to move the project forward.
Very, very interesting. It's not something I heard a little bit, and unsurprising given the nature of your work, to hear about code contributions being a key criteria for partner selection and for working with partners, because I guess in an open source project, you live and die by the quality and sometimes also the quantity of the projects that get worked on in core. So, all right, that's definitely an aspect to be thinking about. I think the way we like to discuss topics on the tab is to create connections and then expand the topics a little bit. And I would say we haven't talked enough with some of our other guests about this aspect of an ecosystem, of a partnerships ecosystem, where your partners are working with you on making your underlying project better. So I think it's super important that you bring it up. It's unsurprising that you bring it up, but I think I don't know what you think about this, Kelly, but probably beneficial for anybody working on any kind of ecosystem to have that mindset as well, on top of revenue and anything else.
Open source business models are full of challenges. I guess that strategic partnerships and fundraising play a huge role. So, what are some of the unique challenges and opportunities that open source platforms face when it comes to building partnerships?
Yes, well, as we have a saying in the community, makers versus takers. Open source is driven by our makers who contribute to the code, participate in the community, attend and sponsor events, and sponsor the Drupal Association. The opportunity when it comes to our partners is that we have a very close relationship with them and they're all makers. Some of our partners have been with us for a decade or more. Some have sponsored DrupalCon for 16 years. I can name a bunch off the top of our head who've been with us for so long. Even through COVID, when we had to hold DrupalCon virtually, we had these partners who just stuck with us. They wanted to see us. They didn't want to see us close down. They wanted to see us succeed. And when we have a new initiative that launches, we have a list of these are the partners we go to ask us to help join and innovate Drupal. So if we have a new initiative, we go to these partners and we're like, we want you to be on the front end of helping to launch this new innovative project. So the opportunity is the community is the heart of Drupal, and that's what moves us forward. The challenge is when we have what we call takers, an organization maybe that has built their business off of Drupal, but they aren't involved in the community, or they don't give the value to their developers of contribution time. So just the opportunity, I'm going to call this an opportunity, not even a challenge. The opportunity is just finding those who aren't yet in the ecosystem and bringing them in to show them that this, and teaching them what open source is. Sometimes their business is built on Drupal, but they're not part of the open source community. So while that's a challenge, it's also an opportunity to just bring more people into open source and more organizations to help us innovate.
Oh, I see. Let me paraphrase it. So, you have makers, takers, and your biggest challenge is to find money givers, right?
Yes. Yes, we're trying to money givers, but those also make sure that everybody is contributing to the project and not just using Drupal. If they are using Drupal, we like to say that we are a nonprofit, and so we do rely on donations, but the donation is what we kind of say is our licensing fee. Like if you're building your business on Drupal, Drupal's free. So we hope that you give back to the community either through code or those donations like sponsorship, so that the community can keep innovating and keep growing Drupal so it's safe and secure.
That makes a ton of sense. Let me ask you a bit of a follow-up on this, because this has been one of the most fascinating aspects of the whole setup for me, working across multiple open source projects. When you talk about and this opportunity of converting takers into makers, what would you say is the number one value proposition that you put in front of those takers to realize that being a maker is an actual advantage and a value for them?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So, open source and Drupal is only as good as our makers. So, right now, for instance, we have for the first time in 23 years, we're releasing a new default download of Drupal called Starshot. And it's a version of Drupal built on Drupal core that enables site builders that don't have a lot of experience to create a site. So, with these new innovations, we're asking our partners to actually innovate and contribute to it. So kind of what it's in their best interest to be a part of building the next version of Drupal. And another incentive for them is we're more and more getting end users who are saying we only want a Drupal certified partner to work on our sites. It's in their best interest to be a part of Drupal. Some of these end users and nonprofit and higher ed want to have a certified agency do their work.
Super. It sounds surprising.
I totally agree with you. As being safe, open, secure are big things, and that's also our core product of Drupal, not Starshot, is for enterprise level organizations. So yeah.
And the platform is not controlled by any single entity that might turn hostile or be taken over by somebody who's hostile, right, to a particular government. So here you really have that. I mean, there's no guarantees, and security is a mindset, right? There's no guarantees that it's always going to be there, but at least certainly it's a key value proposition for Drupal as an open source platform. On top of Starshot and the certification program that you've talked about, can you maybe give us a couple more examples of Drupal's innovation that is either driven by your partners or has developed in concert with your partners, so people get a better sense? Because I'm super excited about this conversation in no small part because we rarely get to discuss innovation and growth of a platform through partnerships, and not just in commercial terms, but actually technologically. So if you have more examples of that, I would be super keen to hear them.
Yeah, well, some of our modules which are getting the most contribution are our strategic initiatives. So we have core maintainers, and they determine where our strategic initiatives, what we should be working on. One other example is some of our Drupal initiatives, like recipes, is one that has a lot of innovation going into it. And our developers and our agencies, those are the ones that they're working to contribute to a lot. And then what comes from that is, for instance, recipes is now going to be a standard module that's included in Starshot. So before you had to add recipes while you're building Drupal, now it's just going to be included. So the innovation, it's like, even though Starshot's brand new, all the components of it are not new. And they're things that people have been contributing to and innovating for many years. And it's great just to see that all this hard work is just going to be automatically included in Starshot, this big release that will be open to more people to be able to experience Drupal with.
You've touched on three things that I really want to riff off, and hopefully I won't forget any of them. And if we do, then our listeners won't even know, because we will have a cut and come back. This is through the magic of the web. But let me tell you, first of all, a piece of good news that you might not have heard. At the recent WordCamp, first of all, what are recipes, right? Even because people might not be so much into web development who are listening to us, but are very much into partnerships. Recipes are not how you bake an apple pie. Recipes are blueprints for the creation of websites, right? And it's truly unique innovation inside the Drupal space. However, across the open source ecosystem, the idea of being able to have this as a concept has been definitely taking over, and Drupal has been really leading the charge here. So that's point number one. That's an explanation for all of you out there. And just think about it more broadly. If you're not a web developer, or you're not a partnership person for web development, think about blueprints, and or, as Drupal calls them, recipes, as an interesting approach to defining the future roadmaps of your products. And point number two, which is going to be hopefully news for you, Kelly, because I haven't shared this with you before, for it to be a surprise. At the recent WordCamp Europe, and obviously WordPress is famously one of the biggest frenemies of Drupal, right? There's the two largest open source platforms out there with a relationship that goes back many years. Matt Mullenweg, the founder of one of the co-founders of WordPress, was struggling a little bit to give an acceptable and inspiring name to the concept of these blueprints. And somebody from the audience, who's a dear friend and colleague of ours, who's been working across our companies and associations for a while now, Adam, he has brought up to Matt the fact that within the Drupal community, this concept is actually called recipes. And Matt was in love with it. He fell in love with it right there on the stage, and he said, well, this is an awesome name. We're using it.
Yes. Okay, I actually we did know this, and we have a lot of our community does Drupal and WordPress, and so I think there was Drupal community there, and we heard it. It sounds great. It sounds like they know it came from Drupal.
I want to bring this back into the broader point that I'm extracting from this. This innovation focused on user value, it produces concepts and ideas that go way beyond the ecosystem. You shouldn't think about it as, hopefully you shouldn't think about this just as, hey, well, somebody just borrowed our idea and implemented it elsewhere. No, it's about growth outside of the initial boundaries of the way you might be used to thinking about the ecosystem that you have, and the impact that it has goes way beyond what you originally imagined. So anyway, that behind us, the last thing I was going to mention is the concept that's actually also a little bit common to across multiple open source platforms, is the concept of core maintainers and core contributors. Maybe we want to talk about that just a little bit. Maybe you want to give your perspective on what the association thinks of because again, for folks who are not familiar with this, these are not employees of Drupal. Some of them might be working with the co-founder, with Dries and whatever, but not all of them, and definitely not the majority of them. A lot of these people come from elsewhere, and they are the ones who are responsible for how the product works. How do you think of them within the context of the partner?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I personally think of them as celebrities. They're extremely important to our ecosystem, and you're right. They are sponsored by organizations, so they work for big Drupal agencies, but a lot of times they get laid off just like the rest of us, and they struggle. But they are core maintainers, and so their job does not stop. They might get laid off one day, and the next day they're still on Drupal core, because that's the backbone of our innovation, and they're still working. They have all of these committees they're on. They're all day on Slack, and they do speak directly to the Drupal co-founder, Dries. He's the project lead, and he's still working with them. So they are highly amazing people, and they're always at DrupalCons. But when they get laid off and they need new work, they're constantly looking for someone to sponsor them. And the interesting thing is, all the contribution they do, they get it. Obviously, they contribute under their own name, but when they are sponsored by an organization, that contribution goes to that agency's company. And so that makes them a more highly valuable or highly ranked certified partner. So it's just, what I'm trying to say there is that these people aren't just doing it for an organization. They move around to organization because their passion as a developer is with open source, but they need they need to work and make a living doing it. So they're not all constantly moving, but that's the great thing. Hire one, and not only do you get the value of their contribution, but you're supporting even more so the value of this open source project that they're a core contributor, and they're leading the path for innovation at Drupal.
Again, you're touching on two key concepts, and I know we need to be getting along with this, but I can't help myself not to reiterate some of this. It's like, if you're thinking, because we get among our listeners, we get people at different stages of their partnerships career. If you are tasked with, or you're passionate about developing an ecosystem for your product and your company, you just heard about two really interesting ideas there. First of all, is that enabling others to contribute to whatever aspect of your ecosystem it might be. In Drupal's case, co-contributors, they actually fundamentally maintain and enhance the code of the platform. But think of it from multiple perspectives. And you inspire that passion by being open to them, by, as Kelly mentioned, giving them access maybe to your C-level suite and that kind of thing. And so you get a very interesting community of passionate people who are happy to invest their personal energy and time and knowledge into driving your product and your ecosystem. And at the same time, when you are creating this platform, think about the incentives that Kelly was talking about. Like, when you then encourage and incentivize other companies, like agencies in this case, or ISVs, to hire these co-contributors, to be proud of the fact that they have co-contributors, because that also elevates them within the framework of your partner ecosystem. I find these insights, we don't have enough of them, Marina. We should have Kelly on more often.
I love it. Thanks. I mean, what you just said is exactly. So also these core contributors, I mean, they're the ones that also help guide the rest of the community who isn't yet contributing. So if you're hiring one, or you have a senior Drupal contributor on your team, those are the ones that you can tap to get ideas on how to make the rest of your team more innovative. There's plus another challenge is just we were talking about opportunities and challenges, is getting more young people. How do we get them into Drupal and start contributing and start being Drupal developers? And it is those seasoned developers who are helping us make way with that. But it's also the agency leaders who need to identify and see the value in growing their junior Drupal team. And a lot of them that are partners have definitely done that and implemented kind of trainings within their companies.
If you could offer one piece of advice to listeners interested in exploring partnerships to drive open source platform innovations, what would it be?
My advice is to understand who the right partners are that share the goals of your open source project and are willing to be part of the open source community. I feel like that sounds simple, but I've had partnerships come and go from organizations over the years that were kind of in it for the wrong reasons. They weren't committed to maybe improving the project or to the community and making sure Drupal has a future, and they would only stay with us for a little bit. So I feel like my advice is just, when creating a partner, just communicate back and forth if you have shared goals. And then number two, when you do find a mutually beneficial partnership, create a seamless and easy journey for them to contribute to the innovation. So open source, we kind of talked about, it can seem daunting at first when speaking about innovation. There's a lot to do, a lot of people, a lot of projects in the community to navigate, and having prioritized opportunities for partners to contribute to make it an easy first step.
Right. Thank you for the advice. One of the things that I really like about partner management is that usually you have a very strong sense of why. Why do you partner companies? Why do you go to work every day? The partner manager is a person who usually has the vision why he does this or that. What is the reason for doing your job? That's really cool. That's what inspires me. I really like it.
I totally agree. it's really nice working for an open source project. It has a little bit, it's easy to think of it as mission driven. And it's just, we're still not only for end users to have these amazing secure sites, but also for organizations to foster their talent. There's always something to learn to foster innovation and foster Drupal.
Kelly, we really appreciate your joining us today. Your take on open source partnership management was incredibly enlightening. Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much for the opportunity. It was wonderful to chat with you.
And a tremendous thanks for all of our listeners for joining us today. This concludes another episode of Tech Alliance podcast featuring Andre, Marina, and Kelly Delaney. Please subscribe, like, and share. Follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Spotify. You'll find the links in the description.
Catch you next time on the tap.